Hello everyone, welcome to VENKANNA English Guru. Friends, we are talking about history of English literature. As a part of history of English literature, where we started the topic that is Victorian period. The period from 1832 to 1901. This is considered to be the Victorian period. And we had an introduction class and about Victorian period. Who are the writers? Who are the important novelists? Who are the important dramatists as a part of the period? And as a part and in our second class where we discussed what are the major important features of literature that is composed and literature that is composed during this period. In this video we are going to talk about what are the important literary groups that were so popular during this period. So when we talk about the Victorian period, the period from 1832 to 1901, where you can find three important literary movements which were so popular during this period. Literature was mainly affected by these three important movements. And the one is pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and the second one is Historism, and the third one is Decadence. I'm going to give you a detailed idea with regard to these aspects, my friends. So one is pre-Raphaelite. So once we think about in 1848, a group of English artists. Yes, friends, tell me if my voice is clear and show me thumbs up so that I can continue the class in an effective manner. Come on, quick, friends. Yes, thank you, friends. Yes, guys. 1 second. No. Sorry, guys. Yes. So there are three important movements as a part of this period, and the one is pre-Raphaelites. And in 1848, a group of English artists, including Dante Gabriel Rossetti, the leader of pre-Raphaelites, and William Holman Hunt and John Millais, and organized the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. So these three organized this group. Their aim was to replace the reigning academic style of painting by a return to the truthfulness, simplicity, and a spirit of devotion. So first we need to understand the point is to replace the reigning academic style of painting by a return to the truthfulness, simplicity, and spirit of devotion. So friends, first we need to understand this word pre-Raphaelite, which became popular with the word Raphael. Raphael, as you know, and we had a discussion. Raphael, Dante, Michelangelo, and Petrarch, the popular what Italian poets and painters during 14th century. Raphael was the major important painter who believed that your ideas can be expressed through painting, and same thing was followed by these writers. Hence, these are called pre-Raphaelites. So these are the followers of Raphael and their ideas. What are the ideas of Raphael? Same thing. And your simplicity and your spirit of devotion and your truthfulness can be expressed through painting, not only through poetry, but also through painting. This is the major aim. So our emotions can be expressed not only through poetry, but also through painting. This is the idea of Raphael, which is imitated by these writers. And this is the main aim of this Raphaelites, attributed to the Italian painting and before the time of Raphael. So 1483, 1520. And the High Italian Renaissance included Dante Gabriel Rossetti himself and his sister Krishna Rossetti, William Morris, A.C. Swinburne, the popular writers. Next, these Aristides and who expressed the concepts of pre-Raphaelite brotherhood in his poem and the Blessed Damsel, and Krishna Rossetti remarkable poem Goblin Market, where these two are the popular works of poetry and which exhibited the principles of pre-Raphaelites. And William Morris, the earthly paradise. And three, next, typifies the medievalism and pictorial realism with symbolic overtones, the union of flesh and spirit, sensuousness, religiousness. So, friends, when you read a poem, without reading the poem, by looking at the picture, you can easily guess what could be the theme of the poem by looking at the picture, not the poem. So, this is pre-Raphaelite brotherhood, simply. And the magazine, the germ, friends, this is very important. What is the magazine that is associated with pre-Raphaelite brotherhood? A couple of times it featured in the history of net. So the germ, and it published 4 volumes. So these are the writers: William Morris and J. Milas, D.J. Rusty, Krishna Rusty, A.S. Mimban, published, and poems with and beautiful pictures in 4 volumes. And 3 important poems that were published as a part of these volumes: the Blessed Damsel and Goblin Market and Earthly Paradise. Very, very important. Next, who are the important the pre-Raphaelites? So Dante Gabriel Rossetti, leader; Krishna Rossetti, William Morris, S.S. Finman, George Meredith, J. Millais, T. Woolnor, and William Hall Hunt, and Ford Madox Bott, and Frederick George Stephens, the popular pre-Raphaelites, and T. Woolnor, the popular only painter of the group, and Dante Gabriel Rossetti, only both poet and painter and the leader, and a sister, poet and painter. And this is something about pre-Raphaelite brotherhood. So you need to focus on the magazine, the germ, and the writers, and what was their main aim, and who was the inspiration for this pre-Raphaelites. Raphael, the 14th century Italian writer. And friends, while watching, like our video, comment our video, share our video to your friends and classmates. Next, another important ism and movement that was so popular during this period was aesthetism, or simply you can say aesthetic movement. So what is the etymological meaning of aesthetism? Study of beauty. So science of beauty, study of beauty is nothing but aesthetism or aesthetic movement. So how they actually applied to literature, that is what aesthetic movement. It was a European phenomena during the late 19th century that had its chief headquarters in France. Friends, you need to get the idea. The popular moments: aesthetism, decadence, Dadaism, surrealism, absurdism, existentialism, all these first originated only in France. Later, they became popular in other parts of the world. So, the innovative ideas which were first began only in France, remember. And one of them is aesthetism. The historical roots of aesthetism are in the views proposed by German philosopher and Immanuel Kant and his critic of judgment in 1790, who popularized the concept like. Next, the pure aesthetic experience of disinterested contemplation of an object that pleases for its own sake. So, and the pure aesthetic and pure beauty beauty kind of experience consists of disinterested contemplation of an object where you don't show any kind of interest towards it, but which pleases its own sake. So art is for art's sake, literature is to be written for literature's sake, and it is not going to create any kind of interest among the people. So that is the major idea of aesthetism. The major principle: art is for art's sake. A literature is to be written for literature's sake. A literature or a poem or art is not a reflection of writer's biography, writer's psychological mode, writer's personal background, writer's cultural background, writer's social cultural background. No, a poem has to be read as a poem. Literature has to be read as a literature. Art should be written for the promotion of art's sake. This is the major underlying principle of this. So today you can see most of the national awards that are given to a lot of movies, and these very peculiar movies, you and I may not watch them until they were awarded national awards. But after they were awarded national awards and we watched them, so which means those movies, those songs, those literary texts were written for art's sake, not to please somebody else. And they are not commercially so popular, but they're artistically so good, so popular, hence they are acclaimed. Next, as a self-conscious movement, however, French aestheticism is often said to date from Théophile Gautier's witty defense of his assertion, art is useless. So art is useless. It's a popular dialogue made by and Théophile Gautier, preface to and Madame of His and 1835. So art is useless. Study of literature is useless. Somebody, for example, you might have heard about a popular director in India, RGV, Ram Gopal Verma, and he produces movies for movies' sake, not for commercial success. And these days, mainly for the past 10 or 15 years. So he says that when you speak to him and he says, "Sir, I watched your movie for 10 times," and he says, "And on your face, why did you watch? What made you? Are you a fool to watch a movie for 10 times?" So he goes on making, so according to him, art is useless. And the process of creating movies, writing poetry is useless. So that is what a popular statement made by Théophile Gautier. And aestheticism was developed by Baudelaire. Friends, there are five major important French philosophers and poets: Charles Baudelaire, Arthur Rimbaud, Paul Verlaine, Paul Valéry, and Stephen Malm. Very popular French philosophers come poets who produced a number of theories like isms like symbolism, Dadaism, Surrealism, Imagism, Impressionism, aestheticism. Like there are plenty of things that they went on speaking about. So this is actually developed by Charles Baudelaire, and who was greatly influenced by Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe was popular American short story writer. The Poetic Principle, and that the supreme work is poem per se. Friends, this is very important. If you understand it, aesthetism, and it's very easy to understand the concept like new criticism. New criticism also believes that a poem has to be studied as a poem. A poem is not a reflection of the writer's cultural background, social background, religious background, regional background. In the same way, aestheticism believes that poem per se, which means a poem should be read, a poem should be written, a poem should be read for the poem's sake, not for any other aspects. So a poem is just like an organic, where you are not going to check something. A poem per se, a poem written solely for the poem's sake. A very popular dialogue, my friends, you need to know. It was later taken up by Flaubert, Malm, Stephen Malm, as I told you, and many other writers of French. All these are French writers. So aesthetism first coined by French writers, Dadaism French writers, Surrealism French writers, existentialism French writers. Remember all that. Next, in its extreme form, the aesthetic doctrine, art is for art's sake, and weed into the moral and quasi-religious doctrine of life for art's sake, with the artist represented as a priest who renounces the practical concerns of the ordinary existence in the service of what Flaubert and others called the religion of beauty. So aestheticism is nothing but a religion of beauty. You are not there to question why beauty is like this. The science of beauty, the study of beauty. And you need to write literature for write literature's sake, not for somebody's sake. Art is not for humanity's sake. Art is not for the poet's sake. Art is for art's sake. Remember, so art is for humanity's sake, neoclassicism. Art is for the poet's sake, romanticism. Art is for art's sake, aestheticism. That's it. Next, in opposition to the dominance of scientific thinking and in defiance of the widespread indifference of or hostility of the middle class society of the time to any art that was not useful or did not teach moral values. So this is actually against hostility of the middle class society. And French writers developed the view that a work of art is the supreme value among human products. So a work of art is the supreme value among the human products. So what human beings produce, okay, and what a human being produces outside, and the kind of literary work that is produced, that is the major important supreme work of art that is produced by a human mind according to aestheticism. Next, the end of work of art is simply to exist in its formal perfection, to be beautiful and to be contemplated as an end in itself. So if you really want to be beautiful, first you need to be contemplated. You need to be satisfied with that. Next, you see a rallying cry of aestheticism became the phrase "I art poor," which meant art is for art's sake. So literature has to be written for literature's sake. Art should be produced for art's sake. You could find a lot of Indian movie directors, Bollywood or Tollywood or Collywood, or many directors where they produced a number of movies for the sake of values, not for commercial success. So if you write and if you write those movies in the form of drama or in the form of novel, they are and examples for this aesthetism. The views of French aesthetism were introduced into Victorian England by Walter Pater. Friends, this is very important. Who introduced who introduced the concept of artist for art's sake in English? Walter Pater. This is very important. And with his emphasis on his high artifice and stylistic subtlety, his recommendations to crowd one's life with exquisite sensations, and his advocacy of the supreme value of the beauty, the love of art for its own sake. So when you read literature, when you really want to understand the beauty of literature, you can understand only when you look into the literature, look into the poem only, not the writer, not the gender of the writer, not the culture of the writer, not the society of the writer, not the religion of the writer. So you could find the beauty only in the poem, not outside. So internal aspects, art is for art's sake, which means if you really want to find out something about the poem, you need to look into the poem, which means you need to observe the syntax, observe the morphological aspects, observe the prosody, meter, stanzaic forms, rhetorics, all that. From these aspects, you could receive the beauty, not by looking at the external aspects like writer or the author or the background or his educational background or his religion, his gender, not all of them. Only you need to look into the internal aspects of the text, of the movie, of the drama, of the novel. That is what aestheticism. That is what neocriticism. Next, the artistic and moral views of aestheticism were also expressed by A.S. Swinburne and by English writers of 1890, Oscar Wilde, Arthur Symonds, Lionel Johnson, Irish writers, all these are James Whistler, Aubrey Busley, all these are popular artists. And the influence of the ideas stressed in aestheticism, especially the view of the autonomy, self-sufficacy of the work of art. Why they mentioned the word like artist for art's sake? Because they wanted to expose the concept of autonomy. So why only these internal aspects were used? Because they talk about their own autonomy in terms of composing literature. So a poem per se, which means artist for art's sake, and you could find the beauty of the poem in the poem itself, not outside. The emphasis on craft and artistry and the concept of the poem or novel as an end in itself has invested with intrinsic values. That's what I've been talking about. So aesthetic writers, they look for the internal aspects, internal concepts, internal ideas. What kind of rhyme scheme has been adapted? What kind of meter? What kind of prosody? What kind of and words, syntax, morphological features, and phonological or syntagmatic, paradigmatic structures that are used by the writer in the text? What kind of figurative expressions that were adapted by the writer internally? So all these were what kind of images were used, what are the symbols that are being used in that. So the aesthetic writers, they don't give any priority to come out of the poem. So when you come out of the poem, extrinsic values, what are extrinsic values? Look and thinking about the character of the writer or the religion of the writer, social background of the writer, cultural background of the writer, gender of the writer. So all these are irrelevant to interpret a poem according to aestheticism. And it's been important in the writing of the prominent 20th century authors, and it is also given much importance by W.B. Yeats, T. Holm, T.S. Eliot, and new criticism I have been talking about. So if you really want to understand the concepts of new criticism, the ideas of John Crow Ransom, Alan Tate, F.A. Blackmore, F.R. Lewis, Cleanth Brooks, W.K. Wimsett, Monroe C. Beardsley, F.R. Lewis, Lionel Trilling, and William Epson, what they actually spoke about as a part of new criticism. Same thing, one should understand aestheticism. That's what I've been talking. There is a close connection between aestheticism, the concept of new criticism, which became popular only based on the aesthetic principles. Next, who are the popular writers? Charles Baudelaire, Flaubert, Stephen Malcolm, Walter Pater, who coined the word artist for art's sake, and A.C. Swinburne, Oscar Wilde, Arthur Simmons, Lionel Johnson, and artist James Whistler, Aubrey Bursley, W.B. Yeats, T.E. Hulme, T.S. Eliot, and the popular aesthetic writers. Same thing. Like our video, share our video to your friends, my friends. Next, decadence. Decadence. First, you need to understand decadence, that it was a good thing in this world. And if you are truthful, and your truthful is not credited by the common people, and people want only lies, okay, and false, outdated ideas, because people want mesmerization. Not if you speak truth. For example, as I told you, if you listen to me, you will only answer when you are writing AP set or TS set or any set examination or net examination. My classes would be very useful only for 50%. Frankly speaking, I'm not, though I'm one of the double JRF holder and trained a lot of people, but still I can say that because examinations like net requires self practice a lot rather than individual instruction. And this is, you're not just going to write one exam and which is for just 100 marks where you are required to read one or two books. No, here you are required to read at least half a dozen books. So that's what, if you speak truth, people are not going to accept. Only people accept what? Some kind of mesmerizing ideas. If you read only these texts, you will definitely get. No, I don't say that. So that's what decadence, degradation of cultural values, degradation of moral values, degradation of human values, etymological meaning. So in the later 19th century, so during this, these were the writers who spoke about degradation of cultural values, degradation of moral values, degradation of and uh, human values in the society. Okay, so in the later 19th century, some French proponents and Charles Baudelaire developed a movement called decadence. So it is also developed by and our popular and father of all these isms, Charles Baudelaire. The term was based on the qualities of Hellenistic Greece. Helen. You might have heard about some Greek stories where people had a lot of crush on certain men or women, but that their wish is not fulfilled. For example, think of, because you might have read about these stories, and in Egypt or in Greece or in the old stories, some certain supreme commanders or soldiers, and they look at certain queens with other perspective, and they wanted to enjoy them in terms of sex, but it was impossible for them in their life. But what happened when they are buried, when they die very young, when they are buried, after a couple of weeks, again they dig the graveyard and they enjoy, and they maintain certain sexual relationship with the dead body. Hellenistic view, remember. So how dangerous, how cruel it is, you just think of. So having sexual life with a dead body, think of. So this simply talks about the degradation of our values. So these are the right as so as a part of this, many writers died very young. The average age was just 28. Most of the writers died very young because they experimented with the drugs, they experimented with the sexual relationships, where you can see one one female with multiple men, or one man with multiple women, like you could find. And what do they do, what did they do? They went on speaking about these actions in terms of literature. That is what, and we are forced to read that. That is what you could see. So the term was based on Hellenistic. This is Hellenistic view. So you are not, you die, but what you do, you can see. In the last 3 centuries BC and to Roman literature, after the death of Emperor Augustus, these literatures were said to possess high refinement and subtle beauties of culture and art that have passed their vigorous prime but manifest a special savor and incipient decay, downfall. So these expose the downfall of human being, downfall of such was also held to be the state of European civilization, especially in France, and it approached the end of the 19th century. You could see the writings of Emily Dickinson, Sylvia Plath, Emily Dickinson, Sylvia Plath, Ted Hughes, or and you could find plenty of other, Robert Lowell. So, and many of the principles were voiced by Theophile Gautier in the Notice. Notice, it's a popular book written by describing Baudelaire's poetry that he prefixed to an edition of Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal, Flowers of Evil. The main principle is that art is totally opposite to nature. So this is the principle of the movement reached its height in the last 2 decades of the century. Extreme products were the novel A Labor Against the Grain, written by J.K. and Eastman, and some of the paintings of Gustave Moreau. This period is also known as fin de siècle, end of the century. So because of the principles, because of the practice of the human beings, people thought that that is the end. For example, usually people have heterosexual relationships, but these were the writers who maintained homosexual, multi kind of sexual relationships. So, and which were not accepted by the society. So these were the issues that were discussed. So which were thought the downfall of the country, decay of human nature. And Decadent writer cultivates high artifice in his style, the bizarre in his subject matter. You could find some kind of bizarre. You could see, for example, Oscar Wilde, one of the Decadence writer, and who created characters with homosexual relationships, man, men and women kind of sexual relationships, which was not accepted at the time, but today it is accepted, and today you could see lesbian, gay, and gay studies, lesbian studies, gender studies. Now today it is accepted, but in those days, and it was considered obscure, decay. So recalls from the fecundity and exuberance of the organic, instinctual life of nature. So literature was also written. Literature was also written. Literature was also written. Yes, cosmetics over instinctual life that comes to your mind, or that you feel by looking at a lady. Cosmetics over the nature hue sets out to violate what is commonly held to be natural in human experience by resorting to drugs, deviance from standard norms of behavior, sexual experimentation. That's what there was a lot of sexual experimentation by the people, sexual experimentation that attempt to achieve. French poet Arthur Rimbaud, the systematic derangement of all senses. Why? Next, you can see the emphasis of the decadence, drugged perception. So, majority of the writers, they took drugs, wrote literature, and had certain sexual relationships, and came back and spoke about before taking drug and after taking drug. You could see. And sexual experimentation, deliberate inversion of conventional moral, deliberately maintaining, for example, you could see, and sexual relationship between and mother and son, and father and daughter, for example. So these were not accepted at the time, but those relationships were created. For example, you could see, and the popular work of D.H. Lawrence, Sons and Lovers. Next, and artistic norms. And for example, the beat poets, novelist of the 1950s, and in the counterculture of next, in England, the ideas, modes, and the behavior of decadence were manifested by A.C. Swinburne, Oscar Wilde, Arthur Simmons, Ernest Dawson, Lionel Johnson, and decadence Aubrey Beardsley. So these were the poets, painters who exhibited these ideas in terms of writing poetry, prose, drama, novel during this period. And the search for why they created all that, search for strange sensations. You could see a lot of people taking drugs and for some specific emotion or expression, and espoused illicit unfaithful relationships, extra natural modes of sexual experiences. So they had, and they wrote about these in terms of literature, and we are reading that. Several of them died very young. That's what I told you. And several of them died very young because of taking a lot of drugs, having all these aspects, and talking about all of them. And representative literary productions, the Picture of the Dorian Gray by while Oscar Wilde, Salome, it's a sexual novel, all these are. And many of the poems, Ernest Dawson's poems, and popular decadence writers, Theophile Gautier, Charles Baudelaire, Arthur Rimbaud, J. Eastman, Gustav Maury, A.C. Swinburne, Oscar Wilde, Arthur Simmons, Ernest Dawson, Lionel Johnson, and Aubrey Beardsley. Very popular, important writers of the time. So these are the major important aspects and that I wanted to talk about. And two more groups. During this period, you could also find the Irish Dramatic Theatre. So during 1899, during 1902, some of the writers from Irish and they started a group, and this group, these are the writers from Ireland, wrote about literature about Irish people and Irish myths, Irish culture. So this group is called Irish Dramatic Theatre or Ryman's Club. Leader W.B. Yeats, Lady Gregory, Arthur Simmons, Lionel Johnson. Next, Oxford Movement. During 1833, there was a group due to Poor Law Act, and which became popular, which classified the people. Usually whenever there is a revolution, that revolution begins only in the university, and this revolution begins in the University, Oxford University, against the Poor Law Act, and include John Cablet, J.B. Puzzle, J.H. Newman, Cornell Newman, leader, and John Cablet. And you could also find social novelists during this period, and these were the writers who exposed literature to talk about the social problems, the socio-cultural problems. Oscar Wilde, Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, George Eliot, and realistic novelist Charlotte Bronte, George Eliot, Jane Austen. You could also include Dublin Thackeray. And these are the things that I wanted to talk about in today's presentation. And we'll talk about literary techniques, poetic techniques that were so popular during this period in tomorrow's class. See you. Like our video, share our video to your friends and classmates. See you guys.